Hey guys, Matt here. This is my review of The Many Saints of Newark, a Soprano story. This movie is directed by Alan Taylor, who previously did Thor the Dark World and Terminator Genesis. This movie stars Alessandro Nivola and Michael Gandolfini. Now, the plot of this movie is, in The Sopranos, the TV show, there was a character named Christopher Moltisanti, whose father was constantly referenced and idolized by Tony Soprano. So this movie gives us a glimpse into the life of Dickie Moltisanti, a man who would help shape the lives and the fates of certain characters, but also how Tony Soprano would become the man he is in the show. Going into this film, when I first heard they were making a Sopranos prequel story, I got really excited because I'm a huge fan of Goodfellas, crime dramas, and The Sopranos. Now, let me say right off the bat, if you're going into this film with the mindset of, hey, I'm a fan of the mafia and gangsters, so I can go into this movie blind without having watched The Sopranos, you'll be disappointed. Because this is not a standalone movie. Just like the most recent Mortal Kombat film was for hardcore Mortal Kombat fans, this movie is for Sopranos fans. It has a Sopranos story in the title. Because you'd be confused and things would be spoiled for you in the show. Also, don't go into this film expecting it to be a Tony Soprano biopic, because it is not. Tony Soprano was in the film, but he's a side character. The main character in the story is Dickie Moltisanti. That's what this movie was made for. Yes, it does have a lot of references, Easter eggs, and fan service, but if you're expecting Tony Soprano, he's in it, but the way Tony Soprano's been depicted in the trailer, that's only a third of the film. So I will start with the positives of this film. The supporting cast is all great, or at least most of them. The standout in this film is the character of Livia Soprano, Tony's mom, played by Vera Farmiga. We hate that character in the show, and Vera Farmiga does a really good job of depicting just the toxicity and the meanness that is that character. She did a really good job as this mom who, it's all about the drama, poor you, she does a really good job of encapsulating that type of character and why Tony isn't a fan of her. Corey Stoll is in this film as well as Corrado Jr. Soprano, and he does a really good job. He does a good job of depicting the inner turmoil, the internalization that Junior does. Where someone will make a joke about him, and he'll have a snide comment. He'll talk very monotone like that, where he doesn't hold his cards out so everyone can see them. He holds his cards real close to his chest, and you never know what Junior is thinking. One of the issues I have in the film, as far as the supporting cast goes, is the casting of John Bernthal as Johnny Boy Soprano. Now, this is Tony Soprano's father, so he should be playing a pivotal, major role in his life. Granted, Dickie Moltisanti was the character that, Tony looked up to, but they do this thing where Johnny Boy Soprano is not in the movie a whole lot. He's in it, but he really doesn't have any impact. One, because the original actor from the show was more seen, he chewed the scene up. He was more memorable. His mannerisms were up there. He was a caricature. Whereas John Bernthal kind of falls into the type of role he plays in a bunch of his other movies where he's just an a-hole. And he's just upset all the time. And so I know they had the character of Johnny Boy Soprano. He had to be in the story because he was around. But he should have just been in prison or something out of the way to kind of give Dickie more light to shine. And of course, in this film, you're going to have the other Soprano characters like Paulie and Silvio and Pussy Bop and Saro. And a couple others, but the other characters are in like a blink and you'll miss them type scenes. Like, I'll just say Jackie Aprile is one of them. So those characters were fine. They weren't in the film too much, and they weren't in the film too little, but they were almost like caricatures where you're like, oh, okay, is that who I think it is? They look like who I think it is. And then when they start talking, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, they're doing the mannerisms, and yeah, that's who it is. So that was a treat to see. Also, this movie has a lot of fan service and Easter eggs, including quotes from certain characters, anecdotes that were shown, and scenes that were used as flashbacks in the show recreated here. So those were really cool. So now on to the character of Tony Soprano. Tony Soprano is in this movie in its entirety. He's played by a young boy in the first 2/3 of the movie, and then in the last third, that's when Michael Gandolfini comes in as Tony Soprano. There's a time jump of about 5 or 6 years. Tony's about 16 years old, and so he's recast, and that's when he's played by Michael Gandolfini. Now, Michael Gandolfini, I've not seen him in a lot of roles, so he may need some polishing if he's going to do other things, but for here, good. He was great as a young Tony Soprano. He had the look, he had the mannerisms, he had the way that, adult Tony would do, like, his breathing thing whenever he gets frustrated, his just the way he would do things. He encapsulated his father's mannerisms, his voice, everything. He did a really good job. It's a shame he's only in the film for a small bit. Which, again, I'm going to get to some of my issues in a minute. Leslie Odom Jr. is in this film. He plays an associate of Dickie named Harold. He's a black man, and so that ties into the race relations in this film and involving the riots. All these people are in Newark when these riots happen. And though they're talked about in this show, the riots seemed kind of thrown in there to be like, okay, we're going to stick historically accurate, and they mentioned it in the show, so we're going to make this a good portion of the film. But it wasn't as impactful as I hoped it would be. Now, the character of Harold, he was a good character. Unfortunately, his storyline with Dickie is not really resolved in the film, but Leslie Odom Jr. did a really good job. It's hard to picture that's the same guy that played Sam Cooke in the movie One Night in Miami. He's a chameleon in this role. He did a good job. Now, Dickie Moltisanti. Alessandro Nivola. Okay, so for a character that was, referenced in The Sopranos, that was idolized by Tony, this guy that was looked up to by all these people, we didn't get a really good glimpse into this character. And I would say that's a fault on the producers of this movie, because it's like they tried to take all 80 plus episodes of The Sopranos, 8 years of content, and tried to cram it all into 2 hours of a movie, and it just couldn't work. They tried to juggle 3 storylines at once. They tried to juggle the story of Dickie Moltisanti. They tried to juggle the race relations and the riots in 1967, and they also tried to juggle Tony being this, apprentice or this person that looked up to Dickie, all in the same movie. And because they tried to juggle it all, it didn't work. Dickie Moltisanti is a complex character. Now, I'm glad they showed different sides of him. They showed the gentle, romantic side of him, but then they also showed, the other family type side where he's brutal and vicious and has a hair trigger. One thing I'll credit this movie for is that they took all of these things from The Sopranos and almost tried to make a highlight reel. They tried to throw in betrayal. They tried to throw in cheating, violence, philosophy, flashbacks, dreams. All of these things that we like about the show, they tried to put in this movie, and it was just a little too much. Dickie Moltisanti was a little confusing because as I'm watching this movie, Dickie acts a certain way, and I just couldn't help but ask myself, am I supposed to be watching this character with the mindset of, okay, he's acting a certain way, so that would explain why Christopher would act a certain way towards Adriana, or animals, or Tony, or other characters? Or is Dickie acting a certain way, and this is how I'm supposed to believe that that's why Tony acts a certain way? It was a little confusing, and the character was hard to read. And I do want to mention that Ray Liotta is in this film, and he plays 2 different types of roles, so it can be a bit jarring at first, but as the movie progresses, you understand why he's in the movie. He plays Dickie Moltisanti's father and another character that I'm not going to spoil. And this goes to show you that Ray Liotta's acting ability is very good. He plays, 2 different versions of Ray Liotta. He plays, the loud and obnoxious, Karen Ray Liotta, but then he also plays the very calm and collect, very serious Ray Liotta, where everything he says, you're gonna listen. And he plays a pivotal role in the sense that everything he says is profound to Dickie. This kind of mirrors the Dr. Melfi and Tony Soprano aspect in the show. And to kind of solidify and legitimize The Sopranos. In my mind, it was nice to see another main character from Goodfellas, aside from Lorraine Bronco, in a Sopranos thing. So that was cool as well. Overall, Many Saints of Newark, a Soprano story, should have been longer. This should have been the first film in a series of movies to help flesh out Tony, his friends, family, and the environment around them. But also, this could have been a miniseries. What better way to pay tribute to The Sopranos that started it all than make Many Saints of Newark a show? It would have been so much better, and you'd have so much more time to tell the story of Dickie Moltisanti and Tony Soprano. So because of that, I'm going to give The Many Saints of Newark, a Soprano story, a B-. This movie had mobsters, gangsters, a Gandolfini, David Chase was involved, and it had an abrupt ending, but it didn't exactly feel like The Sopranos. I applaud everything they did and everyone involved for wanting to make this happen, but the execution just wasn't exactly a hit, pun intended. So until next time, guys, see ya.